Hi, I'm Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston, funeral news for the week ending Friday, October 25th, 2024. It's always nice to start off with a little bit of pleasant news, or at least a fun story for a change, and there is a fun story from Titan Casket, who is kind of in charge of being outrageous, and it's working for them. I had a story, I had a chance to talk to them. I did a story, and I point blank asked them, it feels like this is all sizzle and no steak. And what they said was that rather than have 1,000, salespeople going door to door knocking, they just do this direct to consumer advertising to kind of get their name around. But increasingly, funeral homes are using them as one of their purveyors. Anyway, this week they announced that the mascot they introduced at the end of last year is now a Plushie toy. That mascot is Mort. It says Mort the Casket, but Mort is shaped like a coffin. He's got big buggy eyes and a green bow tie, and he is $20. And it's a cool Christmas present. If you're looking for Christmas presents, this is not a paid endorsement. I just think I'm maybe just easily amused, but I just think it's super cool and funky. So there'll be a link to that in the show notes if you want to check out Mort the Plushie casket. There were a bunch of unclaimed remains type stories this week, and I'm going to take you through them one at a time. It was just an odd timing, and I didn't want to make this the weekly Unclaimed Remains report, but that's kind of what it's turning into. The first one is a story out of Kansas City, Missouri, from a funeral home that was asked to collect the remains of an 83-year-old man, and that did so, but then the family disappeared and didn't give them any of the information they need even to get a death certificate. So this man has been in the funeral home's possession for 4 months, and they finally got, I guess, tired of chasing the family, and they went to the newspaper. Actually, I think this may have been a television story. They went to the television, who did a story on this kind of a name and shame kind of story on this family that didn't come to pick up poor old grandpa, who is still sitting, as of this report, in Hardy's Eternal Rest Funeral Home in Kansas City, Missouri. Link in the show notes. This next story is either touching or uncomfortable, depending upon where you sit. It's the story of unclaimed remains that are getting a Catholic disposition in New Hampshire. The Cremation Society of New Hampshire and Phaneuf Funeral Homes have partnered with the Mount Calvary Cemetery to have a public mass for and then dispose of the unclaimed remains in their possession. According to New Hampshire state law, they can hold the remains for 30 days and then get rid of them however they want. The way that Phaneuf wants to get rid of them is by having them kind of buried on consecrated ground. They do reach out to the families a lot, and the reason that I even saw this story was there's a last-ditch effort where they publish all the names in the paper and say, please, if you don't want these cremated remains laid to rest in a Catholic cemetery, let us know, come and get them. The reasons for unclaimed remains, as we all know, can vary from people who are afraid they don't have enough money and can't pay, to people who don't have enough near relatives that even either know that they're dead or think that they're the ones who are supposed to pick them up. So it's an interesting practice, and they will be buried on All Souls Day, which is the day after All Saints Day, November 2nd. This next story isn't quite about unclaimed remains, or it's not quite yet about unclaimed remains. It's the story of a mausoleum in Shawnee, Oklahoma, that has been crumbling for years. And we mentioned this in case you missed it last year, that there was a real danger of this mausoleum falling down. And it's a private mausoleum in the middle of a public cemetery, and the people who own the mausoleum have taken to powder and have not been taking the upkeep or the responsibility for all of the things that have gone wrong with the mausoleum, and now it is a danger. Since December, families have not been able to go in to the mausoleum because of water and mold and general decrepitness. So earlier this month is October, earlier this month, the cemetery got permission to move the bodies and knock down the mausoleum. And so they gave families 3 choices, which they can have for the repatriation of their loved ones. The next of kin can choose to put the family in a permanent earthen resting place at Fairview Cemetery, which is the cemetery where the mausoleum is, or they can bury their loved ones elsewhere at their own expense, or they can have the loved ones cremated. And there is no charge for the cremation or for the burial. The only charge is if you want to move your loved one to a completely different cemetery. The reason this was news this week is the town of Shawnee is looking for a funeral director. They're taking requests for qualifications for funeral directors to help with all of the paperwork and kind of coordinate the moving of these 220 bodies that are no longer safe within the private mausoleum. There's nothing that's harder to report on. Well, there's plenty that's hard to report on, but it's irksome whenever something bad happens at a private cemetery and the private cemetery is just like, well, not our problem. Sorry, no one's cutting the grass anymore. The perpetual care funds, we do stories on it all the time. There's no reason for them to run out except for mismanagement. And when someone sees, a mausoleum that, when someone, is anyone in Shawnee ever going to purchase mausoleum space again, knowing that in 70 or so years, the mausoleum might fall down and there will be no one to take care of their loved one. It's sad. It's sad that it happened. And they're looking, the town is unable to find the former owners. So, the current / former owners. I hope they do find them, and I hope that they are held accountable in some way. But for now, people just have to decide where they want their loved one moved. A bunch of mergers and acquisitions this week, or in the last few weeks, among funeral homes. The first one I want to talk about is Gray Mortuary in North Carolina. Pelzer, North Carolina, is merging with Thomas McAfee Funeral Homes with locations in Greensville and Simpsonsville. They chose that, Gray chose McAfee to partner with because McAfee is family owned and they wanted to keep their business as a family owned entity, but they don't have anyone else to leave it to. Gray was started in 1934 and McAfee in 1913, and both have been going strong. Actually, Gray was purchased in 1934. It used to be Wellborn Funeral Home, and then in the early 1900s, and then Gray purchased it, and now, not quite 100 years later, are looking to make sure that their family-owned attitude carries on for at least another generation. Service Corporation International doesn't usually make big announcements for small, for them, purchases, but this story turned up in a news article about Harold Seltzer's Steakhouse, which was, I guess, a massive chain in Tampa, Florida for the last 30 years. It had as many as 6 and as few as 1 locations, and the last location went out of business in September, and SCI bought that last location in Tampa for $3.9 million and will be, one expects, opening a funeral home on the property. What's really interesting is that it is this massive restaurant, and if you go to the story in case you missed it, I ran a feature earlier this year about SCI having their event planner go to different places and figure out how it could make more, or eventually all of the funeral homes that made sense into event centers, or how it could at least make a place in every funeral home where families could celebrate whether or not they had a viewing, as is the trend. So please check that out. The story is really good. It was I spoke with Julie Busick, who is the Celebration of Life event manager for Dignity Memorial, and she was super charming. I think it was a pretty good story. If you'd like to take a look at it, link in the show notes. Although I doubt you missed it, you may not have gone. Of this week, the National Funeral Directors Association annual convention was held in New Orleans, and a good time was had by all, according to reports from my colleagues who were there on the ground. I stayed back here to make sure that you got this scintillating news report first thing Friday morning. You're welcome. Also, it just wasn't my turn to go, but I'm looking forward to when it is my turn to go. One of the things that's interesting to me about the NFDA, and sometimes problematic for me, is there is so much, and I want to do, I want to know all the things because that's my nature, and it can get so overwhelming so fast. So everybody needs a little bit of a break when they come back. I always kind of try to prepare to have stories for FSI for the week after NFDA as well as for the week during NFDA, because you would not believe how hard it is to get someone on the phone when they are on the exhibition floor. One story, though, out of it, there are so many stories that came out of it. If you go to the industry news section, you will see all of the releases that came out this week, lots of new products, lots of partnerships, lots of new collaborations. The one I want to talk about is that one director was the winner of the NFDA Innovation Award for 2024. The award is sponsored by ASD, Answering Service for Directors. Another one that came in, the honorable mention, I guess, was Clearview Caskets. That will do it for this week. In case you missed it, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written, edited, and videoed by me, Tony Russo. If you are listening on a podcast and you would like to see the video, you can go to our YouTube channel. Link to that also in the show notes. This is probably going to be the last week that I mention it, but we are having a conference. The Funeral Innovations, Advances in Funeral Innovations Conference is held November 12th and 13th in Houston, Texas. We have a ton of great speakers, and I'll be there. I'm going to be hosting a panel. I'm very excited to be hosting the panel. If you would like to join us, you can get $50 off your registration fee by typing FSI Podcast, all caps, all one word, at checkout. That is FSIPODCAST for $50 off your registration fee. Looking forward to seeing you there. It's really going to be a good event. And that is all I have for this week on In Case You Missed It.